She won most talkative in high school, and she has been running her mouth ever since. Welcome to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast with your host, Lisa Fisher.
All right, we're here talking about a topic that is totally foreign to me, and you're going to have to walk us down information lane. And this is the good thing, Beth Ann. We don't rely on the internet or Wikipedia right now. We're relying on you for the information. And it sounds voodoo, but we're going to talk about hypnotherapy, right? Is it hypnosis? Is it under that umbrella?
So technically you are in a hypnotic state, but it's not like stage hypnosis. We're not like having you quack like a duck or, chug a beer on command or,
right.
Plug in any secrets.
Right. So, when you first kind of approached me, you were both in Central Arkansas, and I knew your name and followed you on social media. And I remember in the beginning, I was skeptical. I was like, I don't know. I'm a Christian. I don't know if I'm going to do this. And then I'll pull the curtain back. We tried to record the other day, but technical difficulty. And you said something like, well, I met you at church years ago. And I went, okay. So I've warmed up to it since the 4 days since we saw each other. So now I'm more on board. But tell me about this magic in hypnotherapy.
Yeah. So if I can back up just a little bit to give you an idea of how one gets into hypnotherapy, particularly if you are a Christian in Central Arkansas. And that is, I am a pharmacist by degree. And the projection of my career, or the trajectory of my career, has been a little bit unusual in that I left pharmacy initially to do functional medicine, which I think you're probably pretty familiar with.
Right.
And at the time when I first launched prescription wellness, that was the weirdest thing that I did. And it's just gotten more, I have had 3 breakdowns or burnouts in my life, I would say. 1 body, which led to functional medicine. 1 spirit, which led to meditation, which I thought meditation was voodoo. I was raised super, super conservative Southern Baptist, which there's nothing wrong with that. But definitely I absorbed some fear that is not of the Lord, we'll say. And so when I learned that meditation is really listening to God, then I was like, well, shoot, I've never shut up to let God say stuff. And so maybe I should hear. And then even with, all of those tools, the functional medicine and meditation, which is super powerful, even physically, I noticed that I knew I needed therapy, and I felt very behind. I was in my 30s. I had 3 kids. And I just thought, I don't have years to sit and be in a therapist's office to figure out what's wrong. I need to get well. And that is when I discovered hypnotherapy. And the very first the very first experience I had with hypnotherapy was just a very generic recorded masterclass. It wasn't personalized. It wasn't live. And I had such a tremendous breakthrough that I was hooked immediately. I was fascinated by the science of it, which I'm about to get into, because I know that a lot of times that is a lot of what I do, is really learning the science behind what I thought was voodoo. And then, being able to share that with people, because a lot of us are missing out on, we're guarding our heart against gifts a lot of times, just because we have that fear in us. And so the science behind hypnosis or hypnotherapy is that it's a specific type of brainwave. So right now, you and I are in a beta brainwave, which means that we are awake and alert, we're conscious, we're aware of what's going on around us. Our logic mind is working, right? We're having logical thoughts. If you're sleeping, you're in a theta wave or a delta wave, depending on how deep your sleep is. Hypnosis is an alpha brainwave. And what that means is that your nervous system is kind of taking a rest, and you are able to absorb more passively what's going on around you. And I say able to now as adults, but you're actually in an alpha brainwave the entire first 7 years of your life, the whole time.
What?
Bananas, right? You have been hypnotized. You're hypnotized every day still. I know. You're going to Google after this.
No, right. I'm on, but I'm still sitting here with you for 55 minutes, so I'm stuck.
Yes, no, we're going. Okay, so this alpha brainwave, what that means is that everything that you see, hear, feel, and experience, your mind takes on as true, and it extrapolates it. So there might be some minor truth to it, but your mind says this is true universally across the board, which is why someone might be, call someone a name on the playground when they're 6 years old, and that becomes a part of that kid's identity for their life, unless that is interrupted somewhere, unless it is disproven.
Right. But same thing with trauma.
Oh, huge.
I'm going back to my own childhood trauma from more than 7 years, but it definitely
for sure.
is a stamp on your heart and your brain.
It is. And so the interesting thing about hypnotherapy is that it's such a tangible experience of beauty from ashes to me, because we can't change what happened.
For those of you listening, that's a biblical term.
Oh,
so
sorry.
She's doing this so that I'm totally on board now.
Yeah. I tell people, the meditation led to deep spiritual deconstruction. And so I tell people often that it got down to, it was just me and Jesus in my living room, and everything else was like, okay, we're going to rebuild this from scratch. And I'm going to let Jesus tell me, what is real. But that's a different story. So when you're talking about, we can't change what happened, but we can change the meaning that your mind makes from it, i.e., that was a reflection of the person who hurt you, or the person who said the thing, or just some conditions that are going on outside of you. It's not reflective of you, of your value, of your identity. And so we can rewrite those beliefs. So there are what I call capital T truths in life, which are true no matter what, right? You are beloved. You are a child of God. Like, that is a capital T truth. That doesn't matter whether you believe it. But often in our day-to-day life, there are little bitty lowercase truths, and they are true as long as you believe them to be. And so if you believe that to use like a really easy example, like if you believe that you're a terrible public speaker, because obviously that's not going to be you, then you're not even going to try to speak publicly, let alone if you get put in a position to do that, your body reacts in ways that your mind is telling it to do. Like, your mind truly is at the root of the vast majority of what you experience. Right. And a really profound point that helped me realize, initially when I did hypnotherapy, I was not planning on bringing it into the wellness space or into, offering it. I just wanted to heal. And you can't go through hypnotherapy without learning much more in depth how your mind works. And as I was doing that, I recognized that I could predict, often within a first conversation with a wellness client, how successful they were going to be long-term based on the words that they use to describe themselves, or to talk about, so many times it's, I know what I need to do, but I just don't do it. So self-sabotage is one of the number one things that we work on in hypnotherapy, because I can give you all the tools in the world to get well, and there are a ridiculous amount of them. But if your mind blocks you from implementing those tools, then they're just, rusty in your toolkit. Sometimes I have to stop the metaphor, or I won't know what I'm talking about.
Right. No, that's good. It's the whole mindset. I mean,
it is. And it dictates
just all of it.
Yeah, it really dictates. So another important science point to know is that we hear often that we only use about 10% of our brain or something like that. Right. So that's not really accurate. The more accurate way to describe it is that we only access readily 10% of our brain. And that other 90% is holding on to thoughts, images, feelings, experiences that are from your past, and your mind is always trying to connect dots. Your logic mind, the purpose of it is one, to keep you alive, and two, to make meaning of everything. I've heard it described as a meaning-making machine, and it doesn't always do that accurately. And so I can give you so many examples, but one that stands out in my mind always is a hypnotherapy client that I did for travel anxiety, really severe travel anxiety. And as we got into the session, which we do regressions to see where in your past your mind is sort of it's trying to protect you from accessing these painful memories, right?
Wow.
And so you are able to connect the dots. It's almost like a detective work. To say, okay, these experiences created beliefs that then led to my current issue of travel anxiety, right? And so with this person, it was actually financial insecurity that manifested itself as travel anxiety when he got too far from home. And he's a wealthy guy. It was a combination of a scary plane experience in childhood, an experience of several relatives developing anxiety around the same age, and a financial scare at one point in his career. And so the combination, the meaning that his mind made from that was, you're going to get anxiety around age 40-ish, and this is a scary thing where you were traveling and you weren't close to home and you felt fearful. And this is, well, that one time you had that fear about, losing money. And so it just put that all together and decided, hey, you're safe whenever you're close to home and in control. And so ultimately, sorry, go ahead.
So Beth Ann, does it trigger a cortisol response? I mean, those thoughts that we have, and then you're trying to...
Not while you're in it.
Okay.
So what's really important is that those thoughts when they're in the subconscious, it's almost like an undercurrent of fear going on, right?
Okay.
And so that when your mind goes to either reliving painful experiences from the past or worrying about potential scary experiences in the future, your body chemicals react as if it's happening now. And so it's incredibly harmful. Yeah.
Okay. But I thought now the thinking in therapy module, and I don't know anything about it, but I've heard people say, but you have to learn to sit with your anger, to sit with your fears, or sit with your bad experiences. So should we let our minds go back to that or no?
So there are lots of different, and I am not a traditional talk therapist, so that it has a different purpose. Yes, I do believe that I'm not fully on board with just sitting in it forever,
Right.
But acknowledging
wallowing.
Right, thank you.
Okay, right. And moving on.
That's what hypnotherapy is for. So the woman who actually created this type of hypnotherapy, the type I'm certified in, it's a cheesy title, but it's also accurate. It's rapid transformational therapy. And she actually created it as she had been a therapist for 30 years, I think, at the time. And or maybe that's now. Don't quote me on that. But she noticed that it's similar to getting on a medication sometimes whenever it's not for like chronic things. People were just kind of in therapy continually and not necessarily moving past the thing.
Got it.
And so that is what this does. So I do tell people often, and it goes hand in hand with therapy. I'm pro therapy all the way. But when someone has sort of rehashed the issue until all the cows have come home, right? Like they're here. Cows are present. And so they're ready
I love the cows coming home.
Yeah, they're ready to move on. That's when hypnotherapy comes into play, because you don't relive anything. It's almost like you're like viewing it like a movie, or like you're walking onto a set of your life in your mind. And you're able to observe it, and you're able to see. Well, self-compassion is really important. So seeing yourself as a little kid, it's not always childhood. I mean, there are often things in adulthood that are traumatizing.
So the point is there are tears every time somebody does this. Every single time.
Yes.
Okay.
But often it happens, you're like, emotions just need to come out. And so a lot of times I'll get someone into hypnosis, and before we even get started, they'll begin to weep because they've been holding tears in for so long.
That makes me want to cry just hearing it.
Right? It's such an honor, truly, to be able to have that experience with people, because they do let you in. It's an intimate thing, even though it's virtual the majority of the time, because they are, often really deep, and sometimes it's light, sometimes it's shockingly simple, things that we
So are they cognizant that they took this trip down memory lane?
Oh yes, completely. Yes. Okay. I have heard of types of hypnotherapy where you come out of it and you're like, what just happened? But that is not this at all.
Okay.
No, you are aware, you're in control the whole time. You can, if you want to wake up, you can wake up, but most people are there for a reason. And, and it's an investment. So they're there because they are ready to they're ready to get out of their own way, to get their mind on board with what they really want for their life and what I believe God wants for them, which is freedom. And that's what comes.
What's the youngest age you've ever had as a client?
As a client?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, probably 20-somethings.
So, okay. I didn't know if teenagers were too vulnerable at that point.
It's not that they're too vulnerable. I would work with, I don't even advertise yet. So it's because I'm in the wellness space, my avatar.
Honey, after this, you won't have to.
Thank you, ma'am.
This is going to get the word out.
Yes, thank you. So the avatars that I have are generally people who are me or my mom. Like those are the most common. And then any man connected to those people. So, and I do get referrals from physicians for things like insomnia and stuff like that.
Oh, so is it, are women more open to this?
Yeah. Well, and modern men
Yeah.
are open. So if for the men listening, if you are a secure modern man, this is, just like any other thing. Like it's bringing back that balance of, the feminine nature that we have all kind of locked up for however long has been going on, and just allowing yourself to be healed, really.
Well, let's talk about your functional medicine journey. So just to remind people, functional medicine gets to the root of why we're sick. Mm-hmm. So you went down this nerdy pharmacy path. I mean, pharmacists are nerds and smart. Oh, y'all are so smart.
Oh,
you measure well. You count easily.
I'm great with my fives.
I'm not kidding. Math is your strong suit. I have such respect for pharmacists because of the specific nature of everything you do.
Stressful.
In fact, this is what I used to say. If you're having a party, my neighbor was a pharmacist. We always had her bring dessert because you all measure so well. And the dessert always came perfect.
We follow the recipe.
Yes, you follow the recipe. So with that, that was your training. But then you obviously had an interest in some type of functional medicine path.
So it's an interesting story. I was raised in pharmacy. My dad is also a pharmacist. And literally they just sold the building last week that they moved into the week I was born. So my whole life was spent behind a pharmacy counter. And he was ahead of his time, truly. Like, he was a functional medicine pharmacist before that was a thing. He hired a nutritionist in the 90s. At the drugstore.
In Mountain Home,
Arkansas, yes.
That's awesome.
But I didn't, it's my dad. So as much of a daddy's girl as I am, I had to come to it on my own, which took much longer than when I was living there. So it was really when I was in my early 30s, and we had 2 babies biologically and then adopted a third within 3 years. And we had bought a house, sold a house. I was working full-time for Kroger at the time.
Simmer down there, sister.
It was, that's the millennial generation, right? I'm a geriatric millennial, I think, technically. But I do still qualify. But it's the epitome of hustle culture is what I was doing to myself. Right. And
burnout.
100% burned out. Looked in the mirror, recognized that I was going to be a stereotype I did not want to be. And I felt heavier in all the ways. And my oldest brother, Ben, is a business consultant in Austin, Texas. He helped start Siete Foods.
Yeah.
And I called him one day because I had gotten word that Kroger was going to be eliminating part-time pharmacists. And I had gone part-time by that point, and so it wasn't an option for me to go full. I didn't. My husband has a business of his own he was building at the time. There was no way that I was going to be full time.
So was this 17 or 18?
17. Mm-hmm.
17. Yeah, I remember because I knew a girl who was at Kroger Pharmacy, and I also knew there's also a battle too for that market. Not that we're going to get into it. Of Amazon can become, or Amazon's goal to become your pharmacist.
Yeah,
which would. Remember, there was that bill that
so the Arkansas Pharmacy Association is very protective of Arkansas pharmacy, and so it's probably ongoing if I were to guess, because Amazon.
That's right. Powerful. And it was making that career less attractive, which I hated because, again, I have so much respect. We need In fact, if you go to Europe, you go to the counter. If you're sick, the pharmacist gives you the prescription.
Yeah,
you say I'm coughing. I have a sore throat. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of your journey.
Yeah. Well, I had never heard of functional medicine. He actually asked, "Have you ever heard of functional medicine?"
Oh, is that right?
And I said, "Well, no, but if it's as opposed to dysfunctional medicine, which is my I would like to know more." So I knew I was going to start my own business. Entrepreneurship is in my blood a little bit, and so I felt okay about it. I was a business major in college, and so
you were. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
I know. I did a biochem minor. I always thought I would own my own pharmacy and, so on and so forth. I tell people all the time, I'm like, don't close off, because if you would have told even my 30-year-old self, let alone my 20 or 15-year-old self, that I was going to be a hypnotherapist, they'd be like, where did we go wrong? Like, what has happened? So, anyway, I got off the phone with him. I had called him to say, my job's not going to be here forever. I need to figure out something. I'm not wired to be a full-time stay-at-home mom. That's just not the way that I'm created, and I'm not good at it. And so I needed that balance. And that's when I dove into, I found the Institute for Functional Medicine that day. It was October of 2017. And I joined it and I started on their path, and I took my first 3 clients 3 months later, and I bought a whole bunch of functional medicine website names because I couldn't figure out what to call the thing. And a lot of the ones that I looked at were like 20 grand or something to buy a website. And I was like, that doesn't seem wise. And so Prescription Wellness was $11.99.
Awesome name.
And I feel like it had both of the things.
Okay, now tell me what, I've seen that because I've gone to that website just as a health coach, it's something that I refer people to all the time.
Absolutely.
But what can you provide somebody if you can't prescribe medicine or diagnose?
So the first line therapy for basically every chronic disease is therapeutic lifestyle changes. And so anytime that I'm talking to physicians, I simply describe myself as a pharmacist who dispenses therapeutic lifestyle changes. Most people are, so I help a lot of people get off of medicine if they want to. Functional medicine is not anti-medication. And I think sometimes people can get that impression. That's not the case at all. It's pro options, and it's pro healing, and it's pro doing what works. And so for me, that's really like the journey of functional medicine to meditation to hypnotherapy is finding, like, reaching a wall and knowing that I'm very stubborn. And so I kind of, if there's a wall, I want to figure out how to climb it or bust through it or what have you. Like, I'm not going to accept that the wall has to stay there when a client is hurting or feeling. Yeah. So that's really kind of where.
Or even for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Because there has to be a solution.
Well, and that's part of what I say all the time is about advocating for yourself, of saying, I just had someone yesterday text me, my doctor wants me to have a hysterectomy because of so-and-so. And I said, if you get a second opinion, but fight for yourself. That's it. Anybody listening, fight for yourself. Yeah. Whatever it is.
And listen to like your intuition. Like if it feels really off, that's saying something. Our bodies communicate with us in so many ways, whether it's emotions or symptoms, but it's generally a message of some sort. Hey, pay attention. There's something going on here that needs to be addressed. And so looking backwards.
Were you dealing with some diagnoses?
No,
or a diagnosis?
No, I was dealing with like really typical stress, burnout, truly, like the definition. There's actually a diagnosis. Well, okay, take that back. Burnout is a diagnosis now. I had not been given it.
It is.
But it is a real diagnosis, and it is.
Because it's the catalyst for all these autoimmune diseases I'm wearing, It is.
I remember
our pastor, our pastor saying 30 years ago was the first time, and anyone listening, you'll identify with this if you have this. Robert Lewis told us 30 years ago, or 25, he said he knew something was wrong when he woke up tired. And he was a prolific author, speaker, preacher. One of the best I've ever known. And it took him years, and he ended up having Sjogren's, which
I've had a client with Sjogren's. Sjogren's.
It's under the same umbrella that my autoimmune conditions are, but he explained it was burnout finally gets you, and it finally gets your health. So that's why burnout, if you're experiencing burnout, anyone listening right now, stop.
Yes, 1,000%.
That's the first thing I tell you is stop and love yourself, and then we'll move on from there.
Yes.
So what did you do then? What was your first stop and love yourself in that?
So my first stop was to take responsibility for myself and to say, you know what, I wouldn't have called it conditioning at the time because I didn't know, but I was really operating on autopilot. Which goes back to the subconscious mind. That's what that 90% is, running your autopilot.
Okay. Yeah.
And so at that time for me, it really was, I was heavier, I was inflamed. And I really thought, when I found functional medicine, I thought like, this is the end all be all. The world, Arkansas is 48 out of 50 in the health spectrum.
On everything.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, I just was so excited to bring this. And I did not realize how many times I would feel like I was banging my head against a wall because it just wasn't sinking in. And I've learned now that people have to be I don't go seek people out. I let them, they've got to be wanting it. Like desire is really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for me, it was, anxiety is, I'm not the best patient. So I definitely had severe anxiety, but I developed anxiety after all of this. That's what led to meditation. So I healed what was physically bothering me. And then when I left pharmacy to work from home, so this is a beautiful story. I launched Prescription Wellness on a Friday in March of 2018. That Monday, our district manager came in and said, this will be, they gave us a while, but it was like a 2-month notice. But 3 days after I launched, I learned that I would not have, the job that I had.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so I felt so protected, and it was such a beautiful moment to like feel affirmed, like, okay, I'm doing what I'm.
Well, the best $12 investment of your life, whatever the website was. Yeah.
Right. All the other things. But when I started working from home, I tell people the only way I know how to describe it is I feel like God let me go through my own personal quarantine a couple years early, so that I would be, because by the time the I shouldn't call it regular, but the world quarantine came, that didn't feel to me the same way it felt to most people, because I had already come through. I had such a dark period when I didn't realize how much I work with a lot of religious trauma as well, because we absorb things from, if you're raised in a fear-based religion versus the relationship. And it's not, I don't want to speak negatively of it. It's just, it was the time, it was the 80s and 90s, and it was all hellfire and brimstone.
That's right. It was the message you were getting, but it's how sensitive you were to that message. Other people did this. They
shook it off, but I cared.
Right.
Yeah.
The way you're wired, you cared.
I did.
I totally get that. And this isn't looking and pointing fingers.
No,
at any
not at all.
people.
It's just it was my journey, which was that I had absorbed basically that I was bad and broken and my insides were untrustworthy. And so I could not sit alone with myself. And I'm also an Enneagram 7, which, as you know, that's like, it's, we shove, we distract, and pharmacy's distracting. Like, you can distract yourself.
Wait. I got to back up though. An Enneagram 7 doesn't put herself in a self-quarantine in 2018.
I didn't. Because I didn't know
I almost died. I almost died during the one in 2020 because of the isolation. So were you isolating kind of in 2018 in order to sit with yourself?
No. I was isolating because I got isolated. Like, I didn't know. I had gone from working where, I mean, you're seeing hundreds of people in a day.
Got it.
And I had, I would get my kids to school. At the time, I had one who was young enough that he was home with me some of the time. So I would see no adults during the daytime. My husband was working super crazy hours. And, I had very little guidance in terms of, the entrepreneurship journey, whenever you're on your own and just like in the thick of it, is ridiculous. Like, it's just crazy to not have partners or mentors, and I had some of that, but I just really, the day that changed my life was, I was having like 2-hour quiet times every day. I knew that I needed the Lord. Like, I knew that it was something in me, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And finally, I'd been going through this for months, and if you've had anxiety, just the physical like tension of it is miserable, and it reached a boiling point. I say, I got my kids to school, I came home, I got my Bible out just like I had been doing every day for months, and before I could even read it, I just shut it. Like, I felt the anxiety. It was like it got to here, and I couldn't handle it anymore, and something just gave way. Like, it burst. It snapped, and I hit the floor. Full on, like face down. I put my hands up, and I just
prostrate. Right,
that's right, 100%. And I just was like, here, like take all of it. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't feel like I'm doing a great job at anything. And in that moment, that very instant, literally, I felt a physical burden lift. Like, I felt my yoke.
But you were not at that point. That wasn't hypnosis, was it?
No, this led to meditation. This is what got me out of like, I thought like a nutrient could fix everything, or a lifestyle change. I did not realize how powerful my mind was, and how it was affecting everything else.
Well, what's interesting is that as a pharmacist, you didn't run to your doctor for some candy. You didn't say, hit me with your best anti-anxiety. Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I grew up we didn't have to go to the doctor a lot. We didn't get sick a lot, so that was part of it. But also, like, we had, the pharmacy was next to the pediatrician's office, and so my dad would just call basically and say like, hey, Beth Ann has this, and then, we had it. So and I'm very fortunate to have like lots of physician friends and things like that. So I can talk to them about it. But I also, very few people are perfectly satisfied with any medicine that they're on. Like very rarely, especially mental health medicine. I don't know that I've ever come across someone who's like, yeah, I'm taking this dose at this medicine and it is perfect. And my sex drive is good and my my feelings are good and I'm not eating too much. You know, like it's just, it comes with so much.
So many side effects. And then with that study that came out this summer, that maybe it wasn't a serotonin deficiency after all. So we've been lied to since. I worked for a psychiatrist, did some marketing for a psychiatrist in 90, back when the earth cooled. And a few years before that, Prozac had just been introduced and it became the number one drug. Synthroid before that was the number one drug in the world, or in the US maybe. And then Prozac. And so then they handed it out like candy. I mean, you came in and said, I think I have an itch behind my ear. I think some Prozac would help you. And then we realized that because people told us you have a serotonin deficiency.
Yes.
And now that study said, maybe not so much.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I've seen people do like the 23andMe or something like that.
Yeah,
see that they've got a gene for low serotonin and develop depression. One of the most powerful things I've learned is about, so, we hear about the placebo effect, right? Like people used to legitimately prescribe placebos and it worked. But not only that, have you heard of the no-cebo effect?
No.
Oh man, Lisa. Okay. So basically it is developing things from your mind because they're possible. So let me tell you, this is what.
Wait, what?
Yeah. So there was it's becoming harder and harder for clinical trials to account for the placebo effect because it's growing. But there was a cancer drug trial. It's been in the last decade for sure. I don't know what year exactly. I could find it. That they couldn't use the data. It had to be completely scrapped because hold the phone. 30% of the patients who received placebo, 1/3 of patients who received nothing but a sugar pill, lost their hair.
That is insane.
It's nuts. I mean, they're now doing placebo surgeries. They're doing, it's becoming like it's not just the weirdos anymore. Like I'm okay if I'm in a weirdo camp, but you can't deny it.
So is it then, does that get us to the point as, I'm not a provider, but just as a health coach, me speaking the positive words over somebody and taking them and then them it's just them believing it.
So it's really nuts. Are you familiar with Caroline Leaf?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So one of the things that she really helped me understand that then played a part in, it was solidified in hypnotherapy, is that our thought processes, our patterns, our physical structures in our brain, they're like highways. And the longer that you've had this thought pattern, the more you can think of it kind of going from like a little string to a thread, to a rope, to a cable, and some of us have like entire train tracks in there,
Yes.
And so the longer that it's been there, the trickier that it can be to change it, but it's always changeable. I'm so proud. My mother will be 75 this year, and she started exercising every day. This is not for hypnotherapy. This is just to say your brain changes. She's the healthiest she's been in my entire life. She works out every day, and it started maybe a few years, like in her 70s, she started exercising on her own. But it's just to say we've been so conditioned that certain things come with age, that this is how how it goes. And that's only true if you accept it and believe it and take it on.
Right.
And so changing the way that you believe does change the way that it changes your autopilot and it changes your conscious choice in a tremendous way. And it generally has to do with you believing that you're worth it, you believing that it's possible for you, you believing that it's good for you and safe and right, and that you can actually serve even more purpose in the world when you're healed. A lot of people don't know that they're attached to their wounds because they think that it's where their creativity comes from, or it's what makes them relatable to the world, or it's
their wounds. I see that. I can see that. Well, it goes back to the another term that's current, and we Christians use different terms, but it's manifestation. But we as Christians, I don't say I manifest it. I say I just go before the Lord and ask for it, or I believe that I believe God's word about it, but I guess in secular terminology,
Yeah.
it's manifesting what you want.
It really is. And it's also,
it is thinking that.
And it's also just, I mean, it's ultimately it's freedom, which I always go back to. It is for freedom that we are free, like freedom, freedom, freedom. And we don't realize what shackles and cages we are in because we believe, I mean, I probably would have honestly believed that it was, dangerous or something for me to be a hypnotherapist at certain points in my life.
Right.
Because I was listening to the voice of the world. And for me, the world was actually conservative church culture.
Right.
And
that's
that
right.
was
Your
my
paradigm.
World. Yeah.
Right.
And so,
right. I understand that.
So understanding that the voice of the Lord has something very specific to me to say, and that I have to consciously listen. I have to be still and quiet and listen to that and be led by that. And that is where meditation comes in. But also there are times when listening leads you to these modalities. Like, a lot of people will do different, like EMDR. I have not done EMDR. It's just brought up a lot. A lot of people who have done it do hypnotherapy as well.
And define that for me again. EMDR
is...
gosh,
I don't even... It's eye movement rapid desensitization.
Yeah, and so what I just saw someone today say, well, I'm not doing EMDR, or I did EMDR. And I always forget. So that's just a modality.
It's a modality that therapists use that they use for similar things to a lot of what hypnotherapy people come to. But hypnotherapy can also be really fun. Like, a lot of times, I mean, I am very fair skinned and redheaded and all of that. And so I blush really easily. And I used to, like literally turn red if more than two eyes were on me. Like if it was not just one-on-one and I thought other people, like I could not control it, so much so that I actually did take a medicine for it at one point when I was working for Target, because I was giving all these presentations. And the first time I took it, I started to fan myself like out of habit. And then I was like, oh, wait a second. I'm not turning red.
Really?
Yeah, it was pretty significant. But I actually hypnotized.
Like rosacea would come on?
No, like just bright red.
Blush.
Yes, blushing. Like full, like, I mean, this would have, and sweaty and potentially like my chin would quiver. It was intense. And now I can, speak in front of hundreds of people and be fine.
So was that an anxiety response then?
A type of it. Yeah, it was situational anxiety, I think is the term.
Thanks, right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because it was, and again, that was just also patterns and beliefs. So this, it might have happened when I was a little kid, or I might have seen my dad was a blusher. He's not now. But so who knows where I got that belief from, but I was able to, get to a place, and I literally wire in. So within the session, we do regressions to get to the root of what caused the struggle, right? Like what experiences created beliefs that then led to the issue. But then the beautiful thing is we shift those to the past. So it's not that we erase them or that you forget them. It's that you become indifferent to things that used to be scary to you, or you become just grateful for the contrast of how hard that was versus the freedom that you feel not having to deal with it. So it becomes something that becomes just a part of your story, but doesn't impact you in your present.
So do you move on from that point once that person's dealt with it? Mm-hmm. You can say, we're not going to go back to that dark place because we've already dealt with it.
Right, we release
it. Is it a one and done thing?
Yes, okay. And then so that part is the one and done. And now I won't say that, like, depending on the issue, when we do wellness things, a lot of times it's more than one session, but you don't go back to the same thing. It's just that it's more complex. It's not like, like if you have social anxiety or something, it's more clear cut. But then after we've shifted that, then we actually, so in advance, we design what you're really wanting, what your goals are. So in the case of, social anxiety is one that I have done several times. And that is, we look at, okay, what are your symptoms and triggers and habits right now that are the bothersome point? And let's rewrite that in the opposite way. So if your heart races, then your heart's going to be steady and your heartbeat is going to remain strong and in perfect rhythm. If your mouth gets really dry, then we're going to say that, your mouth stays, moist. I don't like that word. If we, so we talk about all those opposite things, and that's what gets wired in. And that's the transformation part. And that's recorded, only that part. And so then you listen to that because your mind learns by repetition. And so you listen to that for a minimum of 30 days. And you actually, unlike traditional therapy where you're there and you pay for what you're there and then that's it. And if you want to do it again, you come back and you pay again. You have this recording that's yours forever to keep. And it's literally only the good stuff. And it gets you into hypnosis. It has a full induction in the beginning. And so you actually get to experience, because the part of the benefit of hypnotherapy is similar to meditation in that your entire body is relaxing. And so you're getting that unplug or that recharge or however you want to say it.
Gosh, that is so valuable for your health.
It is.
I mean, that's one of the things I push all the time with people about all of us need to get to a spot where we're still.
It actually,
that is a prescription. Yes. There's your prescription.
Yeah.
Get still.
Yeah. And so back to your question with okay, if you can't prescribe or diagnose, everybody that comes to me already has been diagnosed more times than they want and has more medication than they want. Or,
you're right.
So it does become helping them. I tell people very often, everything that you need to get well is available to you on the internet somewhere, but it's mixed in with a lot of stuff that you don't need. And what I do and what we do at Prescription Wellness is really to filter through and then strategize and organize in a way that is implementable and sustainable. But even that part, in order to be able to make the best use of it, hypnotherapy is what kind of is the final catalyst for that.
Okay, so let's say hypothetically someone listens to this and calls you today or reaches out to you. What's the first thing you do with a potential client?
We have a discovery call. So I always have, and they're usually a good 30 minutes. They're complimentary. I talk through some of the science behind it if they haven't, really heard it. Or, just depending on where they are, we talk mainly about their goals and how hypnotherapy can work. And it's also an opportunity to really get to know it, the rapport, because it's almost like we're interviewing each other. Is this, because you got to be comfortable with me. And I think that is why I, tend to attract a lot of Christians, because they're looking for these things, but they don't trust most people. So it's important for them to know that, I'm not going to be wiring in any sort of hocus pocus or anything like that.
Yeah. And I don't know any other Christians who do this, but I don't know a lot of people in your field either. So I'm not saying someone's not.
Yeah. There are definitely several. There are a few in Arkansas.
Okay. See, well, we don't want to talk about them because I'm talking to you right now. Okay, so you have the discovery call. You see, it's like speed dating.
Yes.
You're seeing if this is a good fit, and then what happens?
And so then if they decide that they want to, so I offer, if they're just really not sure, if they just want to experience it, I offer 1 hour exploratory sessions, and those are just kind of miniature, generic sessions. That are just the 1 hour. You still get a recording, so you still have something to take with you. And it's just a way to experience, kind of tiptoe into hypnotherapy, if you will. Other than that, I do either 30 or 90-day packages. And within each of those, it's 30-day blocks, even if you do 90. And so within a 30-day program or package, we do an intake or design discussion where we really talk through in-depth what your struggle is, what the details of that are, what logically you feel like from your past.
But what if you don't know? What if you don't know what your struggle is? You just know I got a struggle.
Then we start with self-sabotage, because your mind can't. So your mind is really good. I don't think I've said this yet, but so when we do regressions, I've regressed people back to 18 months old, 6 months old in cribs. It's crazy. It's nuts because you don't have the words for the memories, but you have the images, you have how you felt, you have what you experienced or what was going on around you that you now can put words to as you see it. And so, I've had multiple people that go to care for themselves as a child in a high chair. That was ignored.
Okay, that's gonna make me cry again. That is so tender.
It is. That's why I don't ever do more than one session in a day. I did that one time, and I was like, I have to because I'm in it with you. I'm there with you, and so I really have to. And the full sessions they're 2 hours usually, and so it is, and it's raw and it's real, and it's I get.
Does it make you cry
afterwards? Usually.
Okay.
I don't, occasionally I'll cry, but normally I just sit there so thankful because I do feel like I have the training, obviously, like I've done what I'm supposed to do, but I do feel like it's part of my gifting to be able to help people connect the dots and then to speak the transformation part. Honestly, Lisa, I believe is like me just speaking love into them because, words that they never got to hear.
So sweet.
And I love it. And I do consider it such a privilege and an honor, and also exhausting afterwards. Like, it's not in the moment, it's thrilling and beautiful and all that. And then when it's done, I'm like, whew, so I've learned that I really have to recharge myself and give myself space to, go back to just like Beth Ann in today and not, oh my gosh, and you become in awe of people. You realize how incredibly resilient humans are, and just their paths and what they want to do, and what they're wanting to bring to the world that they think, would be, sometimes they think it would be wrong of them, or they think it would be selfish of them. For women, a lot of times I see that, like, oh, it would be selfish if I pursued this thing. And that's not true, but they have such guilt and shame. I do a lot of work around guilt, because that's just how, a lot of people were brought up, is that like, you do what you have to do.
That's how the enemy works. I mean, if we're talking in Christian vernacular, that's how the enemy works, is guilt and shame.
Yeah. And attaching to your ego and lying.
Yeah. Right. That's right. So does somebody, I mean, I'm thinking, what if but they're conscious though. So they are cognizant of this conversation.
Yeah, they're aware. And they have the opportunity, and I tell them this: if there's something that you see that you don't want to talk about, then you just say, I don't want to share this.
Pass.
Yeah.
Right.
And we can talk about, because I can still say, okay, what meaning do you think that your mind could have made from this scene? What is your mind showing you? What is it highlighting? What's coming? And it's often it's fascinating. And yes, heavy things come up, but also, I can do hypnotherapy to help improve a golf game, or get better at piano, or, not have test anxiety. So there's lighter stuff. There are blocks. Well, and also, like, there are a lot of studies now that show that practicing in your mind is as beneficial, if not sometimes more than, actually going and practicing. So they've done studies with like free throws and real, easy things like that, or certain piano pieces. And so we're able to really, and you'll talk about, that's a visualization, like you see the ball and it goes to the thing. And a lot of times your body can kind of make that happen. I don't fully I'm sure there's like quantum physics or something behind that, but it doesn't it's not always deep and heavy, but it can be. The important thing is to have a sense of curiosity going into it, and just like I wonder what my mind's going to show me today. And knowing that, one, you're not reliving it, and two, you're healing something. Like it's
so you're
there.
Not reliving
no,
it. You're not reliving it. That's, I think, important.
Yeah. And there are two things that are two sort of like contraindications, if we're going to speak in medical terms. And that is, one, if people have epilepsy, because similar to like the light stuff, the brainwaves can be an issue. And two, if people have had sort of like, I don't like the word, but psychotic breakdowns where they are disconnected from reality.
Right.
Because it's important that people can recognize what's real and what's not. So it would be an issue with potentially feeling like they were reliving something if they were not able to stay in touch with reality.
And does someone have to be completely sober? Because, a lot of people use devices to help them, whether it's Leanne Morgan said it at her concert. She goes, everybody smokes weed now. She was the funniest thing I've ever seen. But whether people think, Beth Ann, that they have to have something to help them relax.
Sure.
Do they take that before?
That's interesting. They've not ever asked. So if they have done, it would not, that wouldn't bother me if they did. I don't.
The other big thing people are doing now, psychedelics. Someone messaged me the other day. What do you think about
I've
psychedelics?
seen a lot. Oh, it's nuts. Mark Hyman did a podcast on it like a while ago.
He did?
A few years ago. Because when I first heard it, that was the first I heard. And I was like, what is he talking about LSD for? But then, so yes, it is coming, but no, that's not something I've had knowingly anyway. That's not something that I've had come up. And my concern with that would be it would be more difficult, I would think, to trust that what they were seeing is what was really
right, because that's what a psychedelic
right.
is.
So yeah, I don't think that would go well together. Okay. But that's the first that I've heard that question.
I was just thinking of anything. Okay, so Now, so you can do 30 days with you or 90
Mm-hmm.
days. And then the next question, it doesn't, obviously insurance doesn't reimburse for this,
Now,
pay for this.
people can use health savings or flex cards
Oh,
if they
okay,
have to have
good.
a letter of medical necessity. I can't guarantee anything. They have to, like, it's a process,
Yeah.
but for people who really, can't afford it out of pocket and have that available to them, it's an avenue that's worth pursuing.
Okay, now the cost. I don't want you to tell us your secrets, your fees, but if you could give people an idea.
Yeah, so if budget is a major concern, I always recommend to do an exploratory session, and we can always just do those recurring periodically. And they're more like traditional therapy costs, which often people pay out of cash as well. So it's just a slightly above that fee, and again, that's because of what you get it's value based, right? So
Is that $100? I really don't even know any of that.
$275.
270. Okay, hundreds of couple
Yes,
hundred dollars.
a couple $100s, and then you move into the thousands whenever you move into programs and packages, because you get follow-ups, you get coaching, you get the benefit of having someone who is a pharmacist and a health coach and a meditation teacher and a hypnotherapist.
You don't have to justify yourself with me. I mean, I get it.
For listeners, in case they are not as progressive.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And again, I'm in this space of health and wellness and functional medicine.
Yeah, and investing in the body that we're going to live in as much or more than retirement accounts that we can't enjoy if we don't feel well. So
that's right.
That's a big
doing these things now. Excuse me, to prepare for a wonderful rest of your life.
Yeah, and to a lot of I've even done hypnotherapy just on like, your life is still ahead of you. Like, it's still happening. It's not over. And it can happen at any age. I mean, I've seen it happen in 20-year-olds and people my age and older. It's but it's a powerful thing to really like in some ways get your life back, get hope and excitement, and being able to set goals and have dreams and not just be kind of stuck.
You're mentioning earlier about the power of what we say to ourselves. I heard Jay Shetty today. I just had some reels kind of going. I was putting my makeup on, and he said it's also what we tell ourselves. And I thought this was good because I think a lot, depending on who you were growing up, were you the smart girl? Were you the funny, dumb girl? Were you the whatever? He said, when you're in a group of people, if you think those people don't have a high opinion of you, how you lower yourself, but how you're with a group of people, if you're with fellow pharmacists, cream rises to the top, you're there with the superstars. But then if you were with MDs, PhDs, you might tell yourself, Beth Ann, I don't know if you do, well, I'm not as smart as these people. And therefore we project ourselves differently.
Sure.
But then if you're in a room of people and you're the pharmacist and the others are third graders, we elevate ourselves, which isn't healthy either.
Right.
Because it can be prideful. But it's external. But it's also
that is an external valuation system, and that is the root of a lot of anxiety, because it is wanting to find one of the biggest underlying beliefs that I discovered in myself was that I got left at church when I was 4. We were at church 3 times a week minimum, right? Like, it's a safe, happy place for me. Blah blah blah. It was at one time my mom thought my dad had me, my dad thought my mom had me. I was like 4, so I formed a belief that I am forgettable. Right from that one time, right? Because your mind naturally is wired to remember the negative because it thinks that's danger. So it's like trying to protect you always. It's trying to keep you alive, not happy. And so my mind was like, hey, you got to make sure that you're worth remembering. And so that rather than having an internal belief that like, I am worth remembering to the people that are supposed to remember me or whatever, I unknowingly had this drive to prove that I'm worth remembering, and other people are not consistent, right? Like, that's why Christ in us is so important, because that's constant. It's unchanging. It's the same forever and ever. Amen. And so to root my value in that, a lot of what I do, especially with people of the same faith, is to get their subconscious mind on board with what they consciously believe. Like, they consciously believe these things, and their subconscious mind is like, but wait, remember this? But what about that time that one preacher said this? Or your, second cousin once removed said that one thing about, so there's just all of this mud and muck in there that can get in the way unless you clean it up and get it out of there.
Okay, now I have to know before we wrap things up. How did you lose your weight? Because you're very slim.
Oh, that's
What
so
did you do?
well, so I would say I actually was thinner at one point, but it wasn't necessarily healthy. I mean, I started out with like the traditional, because this was, I mean, I was 32, I guess, at the time. So I started out with just traditional, like I got conscious of what I was eating and became mindful. And then got into eliminating foods for a while. And then also got to the point that I was like, I think that the stress from like saying, what can I eat? Can I have this? Can I not have this?
Yeah.
Can be even, and I see that in clients a lot. As a matter of fact, we've shifted how we teach nutrition in a lot of ways because it becomes such a point of stress that some people are like, what can I eat? Like, what is this gonna?
Oh, I hear that a lot.
It's awful, really. So that started, and I would say the maintenance phase has been really, really getting on board with loving myself, which I couldn't have even said out loud a few years ago, because I would have thought, not that I really don't think I thought I was unlovable. I thought it was wrong to love myself because I was bad and broken and all the things, you know, like my mind latched onto that so much. A wretch like me, that is my least favorite line in a song ever in all the world. But that was, I really saw myself as that. And so getting to the point that I realized that God wants better for me than I even know to want for myself, brought such a sense of freedom that now, I mean, my wellness journey, it's more intuitive eating type situation now. I don't do the same thing every day. I don't say I'm never going to have that, or I have to have this every day. And I really try to balance it. And that's the way that I teach as well, is daily rhythms and structures. We have a program called Anchors, which literally teaches the anchors of every day lived well, so that the stuff in between the anchors, there's a lot more freedom and give, because I don't think that it should consume your life to be well. But I think thriving is living, you know, in sort of in constant communication with your body and Christ and all the things
and
that you need.
It's unique. It's subjective. It's
different for everybody.
N equals one, right? I understand. And so back to a wretch like me, my mind takes that is knowing in my depravity I was saved, and it gives me hope for my Savior, because I have a million things of bad self-talk, but that one, I know what you're talking about. I know people, but I didn't come from a religious background.
Yeah, that's the difference.
I didn't become a Christian until I was born to Jewish parents, so I have a totally different story.
Yeah.
Yes, I have an amazing testimony, but so I love that part of the song, and I love when Paul says, "Wretched man that I am," because I get it.
Yeah, that is so different than hearing that your whole life as you are. I mean, I talked to all the
never heard it. Yeah,
and I had a different types of trauma within the church that are, you know, I mean, just a lot of hell, a lot of, are you sure you're saved? Are you sure you're saved? Are you sure you're saved? If you die today, do you know where you go? Yeah. Again and again and again. And I'm like, how many times?
I see.
Like, when is this done? And that was really, the Lord had to tell me. It couldn't come from walking down an aisle. It couldn't come from being baptized however many times I was baptized, just to like make sure. Like, it had to come from, it's just a different thing because I was such an innocent kid, and still, and raised in, anyway.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, interesting. Well, Beth Ann, you're a doll, and you,
Likewise.
Very compelling what you're doing. And thank you for letting me work through my skepticism.
It's my pleasure.
When you even approached me.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't want to research this before we talked, because I wanted to ask questions like people who are listening. People who are listening right now are looking at their device going, "You forgot to ask so-and-so," but we're out of time because there's still more to talk about. And I love what you're doing. And so show notes will have prescription wellness and prescription wellness, because that's where they need to go to learn more. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it so much.
Thanks for listening to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe and download all the episodes and leave a review, won't you? The Lisa Fisher Said podcast is produced by ClantonCreative.com.